Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this Tech Talk. My name is Siddharth Sharat Kumar, and I'm one of the hosts for today's Tech Talk, along with Vivin Satyan, who is our Senior Technical Evangelist for the Identity and Access Management and ID Security suite of products. Right. So, thank you so much for taking time off from your busy schedules for joining us today for this Tech Talk. Um, some of you might know that we've been doing a lot of work here at ManageEngine in preparation for the CCPA. We have a detailed ebook that is out on our website that maybe some of you have accessed. We even did a tech talk. Vivian and I did this a couple of months ago, get sort of to help organizations start thinking about the CCPA. And having received a really good feedback for that one, we decided that it's time to do one more, given that we are just less than a month away now for the CCPA deadline. Right. We also did, in fact, a show in the Bay Area just a month ago. It was, I think, on the 31st of October. Some of you attending today maybe also joined us for the show in the Bay Area. So welcome back if you have already interacted with us at a previous event, virtual or otherwise. Right. So thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedules for making it today. We're really excited to be doing this one. We've seen both Vivin and I travel a lot around the world to speak at our seminars. And a trend that we've noticed in the last couple of years is a lot of regional requirements coming in with specific compliance mandates. Right? We, of course, had the GDPR, which was a monumental one, which came a couple of years ago. But we've seen similar regulations coming in Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, in Brazil, and now, of course, the CCPA in California.
And going by the looks of it, it looks like not just California, and it's just a matter of time before the entire US is
swept. Yeah. I guess innovation first comes in California, and then all the other states also do the same thing, I guess.
All right.
US, right? So we've got today to the agenda for today's session. We just got to get things started and talk a little bit about the CCPA itself. And then we're going to look at some of the rights that consumers get because of the CCPA. But more than sticking to the theory, we will look at a few cases on what does it really mean for a business. Now that we have the CCPA, what kind of scenarios might a business have to deal with?
Some real life scenarios.
Absolutely. Just to help.
To our topic.
Absolutely. Just to help some of you out there to start thinking about the CCPA more seriously, now that we're pretty close to the deadline. And then finally, I think the second part of the webinar is something that is we at ManageEngine are very passionate about, building solutions for data security and compliance. And this is going to be something which is very important in light of the CCPA. So we want to give you an overview on how you can get started with tackling data protection and compliance. And we look at a few technologies. Vivin and I are going to show you some important technologies that you need to help keep your data secure and ensure compliance.
All right. A disclaimer. So we're going to be showing some of our solutions in the sense we're going to be showing some solutions from ManageEngine that can help you with safeguarding personal information that you process or that you store in the organization. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you'll have to be using one of our tools.
Absolutely.
You can be using another tool from another vendor. That's perfectly fine. We'd be more than happy if you could take few action items from our webinar and then put them to use in your tool. So even that's fine with us.
Absolutely. One more disclaimer while we're at it is that the content of this webinar is, of course, not official legal advice. So I have to give you that disclaimer as well. This is based on our understanding of the regulation, and the objective is to start a conversation between people like you out there who are dealing with the CCPA and us as vendors providing solutions to help. right? So this is obviously not a legal consultancy. It goes without saying.
Even before we dive into the session, a request from our end would be, please share few action items that you would like to see, you'd like to want us cover in the forthcoming sessions, because we look for inputs from you to work on our topics, work on our features. So please let us know what you want from us as vendors to help you with in terms of being compliant with CCPA.
Absolutely, right? So make use. That's why we have a bullet point that says Q&A, the live chat. Do engage with us on the live chat that you see on your GoToWebinar control panel. We keep your questions coming, and hopefully if we get enough questions, we can try to do a live chat at the end of the presentation, right? So there's going to be a 35 to 40-minute presentation. We've allocated about 5 to 7 minutes for the live Q&A, but that of course depends on how well you can engage with us, right? So let's get started, Vivin. So tell us, what is the CCPA?
Well, I think it's sensible for me to start with the formal abbreviation itself, the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. Now, what does this mean? Well, we have seen another version or another flavor of this, if I can call it that, which is nothing but the GDPR in the European Union.
Yep. So it's almost like the benchmark, right? Because they came first, and it had such a big impact, I guess.
Yes, it's almost the same the same circle, I would say. Everything boils down to one simple concept: safeguarding PII. Now, of course, there are a lot of differences in terms of other legal clause and other legal points included in both the articles. But the baseline is safeguarding PII. Now, this comes into effect on the 1st of Jan 2020 in the state of California. Now, what does this mean is we'll have to look at it from two perspectives. What does this mean for businesses, and what does this entitle the consumers with? So we'll have to look at both these areas in order to understand the depth and breadth of CCPA. All right. Let me first start with a very basic thing here. So let me just start with the basic definition of what is personal information according to CCPA, and is that all, or are we talking about other factors as well? Well, I'm just going to quote unquote the exact lines from the CCPA article, which defines what, according to them, is personal information. I'm just going to read that out so that I don't misinterpret their statement. So, information that identifies, relates to, describes, is capable of being associated with, or could reasonably be linked either directly or indirectly with a particular consumer or household, unquote, is what they call as personal information. And that's not it. They've given us multiple identifiers. For example, your postal address, your unique personal identifier, your SSN, everything falls under the category called identifiers. And then you have commercial information. Let's say you are a coffee shop and you are a 20 employee coffee shop. Well, the first question would be, does CCPA apply for you? Well, not really. We'll get to that later. Let's say you are a 5,000 employee franchise, a pharmaceutical franchise, and then you are processing personal information. And that also has an element of commercial information in it, such as records of personal property, products and services.
Could be healthcare records.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's say you serve millions of customers in a year, and some of them are repetitive customers in the sense, their purchase history, right? So all that is categorized as PII, which is personally identifiable information. And that's not it.
Right, that's not it, right? Because this is what we think of at the off the top of our head when we think of what is personal information. But we've also got a lot of other things.
Absolutely. So I call these as reverse mapping entities, or I can even call them as reverse mapping, identities. Let me give you an example here. The first point that you see on the screen is biometric information, right? Such as fingerprint, face recognitions, and DNA. Now, if someone wants to locate or identify a person using a fingerprint or a face recognition result, it's highly possible, right? It's need not. I mean, you need not have the user's email address or the user's first name, last name to identify the user. You can even have their DNA sample, or you can even have their fingerprint, or maybe their face recognition.
In fact, this is more accurate, right? Because first name and last name is, I mean, fingerprint is the most unique identifier that you can have.
Absolutely. I mean, if someone wants to do a reverse mapping to PII, a biometric information can be the best source to actually get to that right target, right? And also IP addresses. For instance, if someone is using a static IP address to access a certain resource, and if I know what the IP address is, I can very well map it back to the user, right? So, and the same holds good for audio visual information as well. So it's not just direct information that you give away to a business that is considered as personal information per se. It is also the digital trail that you leave, which can take things back to you, which is now considered as personal information as well, according to CCPA.
And it's, I think, a trend that we are seeing. CCPA, yes, but also the GDPR and some of these other regulations that are out there. And which is why I'm sure, Vivian, you've also seen when we travel a lot, and a lot of the time when we go to get our visas and we're giving our biometric information, a lot of the embassies make us sign a consent form. I remember I did it with Canada a few months ago when they made me sign a consent form saying they can process my biometric information.
I did this today morning.
This morning for the UK, right?
For the UK.
Right. So this is we just wanted to talk about, bring this aspect in here just to say how this is changing the way organizations are now handling our data, right? So even someone who's processing biometric information is having to make certain changes with in terms of privacy notices that they have to put out and things like that.
All right. So now we know what is personal information according to the CCPA. It's not just the direct information that consumers give away to business. It is also an interpretation of their digital existence.
Right.
That is considered as personal information as well. So if you're processing it, well, you're handling personal information as well. Now,
right. So the rights granted to the consumers, right? So we know what PII is. Now, what rights do the consumers, that is those who have this PII, what are the rights that they now have because of the CCPA? Now, many of you might have read some of these things online, and a lot of these have become like almost jargon in the data privacy industry, right? You have things like the consumers have the right to access, right to be informed, right to opt out, right? If they don't want to receive, they can opt out of, say, marketing communications from your organizations.
Well, Sid, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Now, let's say, let me know whether this is sensible. So if I'm a vendor and I'm actually creating a web page that is actually going to invite leads or clients to that page. Now, all vendors from now on, if they are going to establish some sort of business contact with the state of California, they should now include in their web page an option for consumers to opt out of the campaign or of the activity,
right,
when and where they want. So it's not like they have to be with you for the entire course. They can opt out at any point in time.
Right. It's as simple as if they're filling up a form on the website. Now organizations and a lot of the marketing people in the organizations might be aware of this, is they have to now give the option for the person filling up the form the right to opt out of the data collection and the processing. Right. So this means that the organization has to now start to make changes in order to make sure that the rights of the consumers are protected, right? So if now you say something like right to delete, and we're just going to look at this in a minute, this means that the consumers have the right to be forgotten, which means they have the right to get erasure of the data that the organization has collected, which means that the organization needs to have the relevant data systems and processes to cater to these requests.
All right.
Right? So that there have to be changes that organizations have to make to ensure that these rights are upheld for the consumers.
Yeah, but adding to the right to delete point that you just mentioned, I think right to delete also needs to be looked at by taking into consideration that we have other forms of regulation that makes it a mandate for organizations to store employee data even after they leave the organization for forensic analysis.
That's a very good concern, and I believe in the US they have certain regulations that don't that require, even when some personal data is deleted, that it has to still be stored for a period, and there is a process before permanent deletion. And in that case,
what do we do?
What do we do? Right. So I'm going to get to that in a couple of slides. Like, what do we do then as well?
All right.
Right. And so other things as well. Information security, which means the consumers, the data needs to be kept securely. And the last point is very interesting, which is non-discrimination.
Yeah, can you explain that a bit for me?
Which basically means that all of these rights that consumers have shouldn't change the way the business views them, right? So just because me as a consumer, if I exercise my right to opt out, then you as a business cannot treat me any different from your other customers.
All right, let me make sure that I got that right. For example, if me and you are consumers of a business and you decided to opt out of that business's activity, or you don't want that business to process your personal information or whatever, that business should not treat you and me differently.
They have to give the same service, the same product for the same price.
All right.
Right? So that is why these are rights. These are not, say, things that, you can maybe, you get to buy the right to the delete. It is a fundamental right, and it's just by law that everyone gets all of these things.
This is a consumer privilege, basically.
Absolutely.
All right.
Right. So I want to give you 3 simple cases to help you understand exactly how these rights can play out, right? The first is, you might have a case where customers request to know what data has been collected. So they're accessing the right to access in this case. So a consumer can request your company to disclose all the data that has been collected about them. So they can simply come and tell you effectively, hey, what data of mine do you have? Right? And you will be expected now by law, because of CCPA, to disclose all of this data to the consumer and also tell them for what it is being used, and if you have shared it with any other third parties.
All right. Now, one question. So in this context, the first line says a consumer can request your company to disclose all the data. Here, in this specific context, data means
the
personally
PII,
identifiable information.
Every single thing that you mentioned.
All right.
Including those
biometrics.
But wait, that's more, right? Every single PII, the consumer can say, tell me what you have, and the business has to disclose everything.
So me as a consumer now has that right to actually walk into, a company that actually processes my information, and also I gain visibility into what is being processed.
Exactly, and you can do this twice a year for free of cost. So this is a fundamental right. You don't have to pay for this, right? This is something that you are entitled to just because you're a consumer.
Don't you think that people can misuse this?
That is why there is a limit. Twice a year for free, right? So you can't use it to harass a business, for example.
Right?
Makes
sense.
You can maybe do it twice, but it stops that.
All right.
Right. Which brings me to request to delete. Now, maybe you have requested to find out what the business has about you, and you are like, hey, hang on, why does this business know my biometric information? Or why do they have this audio, maybe from some speech of mine? Why are they storing it? Or why do they have my social security number? And you can request point blank that the business delete that information.
Oh, let's say I have an account in a bank that's in California, and I'm relocating to somewhere in New York, right?
Exactly. Great. That's a great example. And
I don't want the bank to have my information. I can even request them to delete my data.
Exactly, because now you might be closing the account. So why should the company continue? You don't want them to still store all your personal data. And you can tell them, again, it's your right to tell them that delete my data, and organizations must respond to the request within 45 days, which means they have to delete it and
they should
they should
confirm.
confirm that via communication to you that this has been deleted, and they give you a report that says officially this has been deleted.
Okay.
We have a simple chart here, just to simplify what we said. So a consumer can reach out to you via any communication. It could be an email, telephone, or any other method. They explicitly say delete my information. Once they say that, you should have a process, an IT process, which has a mechanism for responding to that consumer. So you first maybe give them a confirmation that, yeah, your request has been taken. Then you go ahead and identify all the information of that consumer that you have collected in all your different, it could be your servers, it could be on the cloud, it could be stuff that you've even shared with third parties. You get all of that, you delete the data, and then you have the process to respond back to the consumer and report to them that all of this data has been deleted.
All right.
Right? And now, Vivin, you asked a very interesting question. What about some of the data that cannot be erased immediately in 45 days?
I was about to remind you about that, because certain regulations do not allow you to delete personal information. So let's say I quit the company. And after 45 days, I just go back to the company.
Right. So your data might have to be there by regulation, in which case such a request, when you're communicating back within 45 days, the report will say that because of this data is still there with us, but it will be deleted once the stipulated time frame.
Which means in either case, the consumer has to be updated.
Oh yes, that doesn't change.
All right.
You have to respond. That report has to go back within 45 days.
All right. Even if I delete the information, or
it's pending deletion.
Pending deletion. All right. All right.
So this is request to delete. And finally, the third case is, what if the data is breached? Right? No. So if you have, as a consumer, you have given your data to a company for whatever reason as part of the business, and then the business has a data breach that compromises the consumer's personal data, then what happens? Now, because of the CCPA, that business can face serious legal repercussions, and the consumers can now actually sue the business, and they can chase the business to say why was their personal data compromised. And if they are being sued, the organization is liable for the breach, and they must be able to demonstrate technical security measures that they had to prevent such breaches, right? And there's a fine here. So this is where it is difficult for businesses, because if it's many consumers that are affected by the data breach, the fine can be as high as $750 per consumer. So it's like a class action lawsuit. And if the business is in a position where they say, you know what, I don't know why the data breach happened, they can pay, they might end up paying $750 per consumer. And think about, what if you're a business that deals with, say, 100,000 consumers?
Now, this takes me back to 2013 and the year 2017, where a major email service provider was attacked.
Right.
And we had close to 3 billion accounts getting compromised.
Right.
In that case, $750 per consumer. Well,
I'm not very good at math, but I think that's a lot of money. Right. So it's so important here for organizations to have security measures in place, so that when it's a lawsuit, they can defend themselves by saying that they had all these reasonable measures, right? I mean, the law at the end of the day is not something that is unfair and trying to punish you, right? Because sometimes bad things can happen, right? Despite best efforts. But a business must be able to prove that those best efforts were taken, right?
In this case, I think the regulation checks whether the organization has maintained or has made at least the basic measures
are they accountable? Yes. Right? So you can't just, if a consumer is giving you data, you can't be careless and say, yeah, now that I have the data, I don't know what's going to happen to its security. But you need to be able to defend that, hey, all of these measures were in place.
All right. So far we've seen what is personal information according to the CCPA. Still in the hang of the GDPR.
Too many regulations.
Too many regulations. So this CCPA, we know what personal information is, and we know what consumers now, or we know what consumers' privileges are, and we have also seen some examples. Well, now let's look at.
So who does it finally apply to? Now I'm sure many people are
Exactly.
concerned, wait, what do I do now? Do I have to do something about this?
Yeah. The good news, if you are a non-profit organization, forget about this, right? Now, this regulation is applicable only for the for-profit organization, and that too, there are various conditions. Condition number one, if your company's annual revenue is 25 million US dollar or more, then, and you're a for-profit organization, which means now you come under CCPA's radar. If you are a company that sells, purchases, personal information of more than 50,000 consumers, okay, it can even be devices, in California per year, which means you fall under CCPA. Now, the third condition is if you or if your business is deriving more than 50% of its annual revenue from selling California consumers PI or nothing but personal information, then CCPA is applicable for you. There is an exclusion here, and the exclusion is if you're already under the compliance of HIPAA or GLBA or DPPA, then you are exempted. Can I say that?
Yes. So if the data that you're looking at comes under the scope of HIPAA already, then CCPA does not apply to that data.
Because
but you might have other data. So that's the interesting thing. If you have other data in your business, which is not under the scope of HIPAA, right? Maybe it's not directly patient healthcare or something like that.
Let me actually give an example, see whether that's right. So let's say I work in a pharmaceutical industry, and then my IT division is actually deals with personal information. Let's say it processes personal information and all that. Whereas the other division, the finance, does not deal with personal information at all. In that case, my division is under HIPAA, whereas the finance division is not under HIPAA.
It may not even be at a division level. It's just at the data level, right? If it's PHI, which is personal healthcare information, and it comes under HIPAA, then it does not have to come under CCPA.
All right.
If it's some other kind of PII,
which does not come under PHI's definition,
then it will come under CCPA if they satisfy the above criteria.
All right.
Right?
All right.
But which is also quite to say that a lot of the regulations at the end of the day are quite similar. So which basically means that if you've been doing the right things all along, you generally are in good shape.
Now, so far, we have looked at things from a consumer standpoint, from a business standpoint. Now, what does an administrator do? How do you prep up your infrastructure and ensure that you have got the basics right and you are ready for CCPA compliance?
So for IT admins who are looking to now take data protection more seriously in light of the CCPA, we think that this is a basic strategy for anyone who is new, trying to get started with adding some measures for security and compliance.
And I believe this strategy, just by having a look at the strategy, this looks common for all the sectors, irrespective of what vertical they belong to.
Absolutely. This is a general outline for data security.
Good.
Right? So the first, let me do the first couple of these, and Vivin can talk about the next two.
Sure.
Right? So the first idea is called data discovery. Right? So you need to know what kind of personal data are you dealing with in the first place, and where is it stored in your network. Right? So you can see why this is so important, especially when it comes to handling some of these requests that consumers might give. Right? You need to know you have such a vast network with a lot of
terabytes of information,
so much of data, and you need to know, hang on, what am I dealing with? What kind of data does my organization collect? Do we deal with credit cards? Do we deal with biometric data? Do we deal with addresses? It could be anything.
Yeah.
So what do we deal with is something you need to identify, and where is it being collected and stored in the network is then what you need to identify.
That's step number 2.
Which brings me to step number 2, which is to check, are there any violations? Right? So maybe if you're not supposed to store a certain kind of data on on a particular system,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe if you store a particular kind of data, you need to apply certain extra policies on them. You need to be able to flag that this data exists, right? And because it's data collection is dynamic, right? So what data I have today is not the same as what I might have 6 months down the line when I've collected more things. So as I collect more and more things, maybe I'm collecting something illegally without knowing. So I need to be able to scan my network and and say that, hang on, wait, why did some credit card information get stored on this server, and be able to check for such violations.
All right, awesome. Now that we have discovered data, let's say we assume that we have discovered PII, or let's say we discover or we have located where personal information is inside our infrastructure. The immediate thing that we need to know is who has access to them, right? We need to know who, what, when, and where, from not just from an auditing standpoint, but also you need to have clear-cut reports. You need to have transparency of who has access to those personal data. Well, after that, it becomes very important for us to audit the activities. So there are two steps here. Step number 3 is understanding who has access to that personal information. And step number 4, if you feel that personal information is being accessed by someone inappropriate, or someone who should not be having access to that, manipulates the information, you should have an audit trail. So I think all these 4 steps together basically define a very effective strategy for dealing with or to be in compliance with CCPA. What do you think, Sid?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a great starting point for especially people who are doing this at an early stage or for the first time. And which is why we have listed out 5 key technologies that IT teams need to look at for data security, right? To translate the plan that we had on the previous slide, these are 5 key technologies for which maybe you have to buy some solutions plus revamp certain existing processes in your organization.
So basically what we're doing here is, in the previous slide, we had a strategy. You're basically mapping that strategy with the technology that organizations should be
to implement it. Absolutely.
All right. Now, the first one is data discovery and storage analysis. Second one, access control. 3, 4, and 5 is more of auditing. It's understanding who, what, when, and where. All right. So let's get started. And from here on, we are going to show you how do we help you achieve all these 5 important aspects by using one of our tools, right? So first one is data discovery and storage analysis. There are 4 aspects to it. The first aspect is assessing the risk related to storing PII and processing it inappropriately. The second one is you'll have to define rules and policies as per the CCPA guidelines, and then perform a discovery, and then try to discover whether you have such personally identifiable information stored anywhere in the infrastructure. Now, after you do this, it's not a one-day thing. Am I right, Sid? You don't just scan it once and then say,
it should be a periodic scan.
Yeah,
maybe a daily or a weekly scan depending on the bandwidth. Right?
Yeah, so step number 1 is you basically have to create rules in accordance with the CCPA standard, and then use those rules to discover PII in your infrastructure. Now I'm going to show you how ManageEngine can help you deal or help you create such rules and then scan the infrastructure. Well, I am going to quickly jump to one of our solutions, which is Data Security Plus. Now this application, what it does is, this basically helps you do a lot of things, but I'm not going to dive into the details of it. One thing that you can do with this tool is you can create a role that you want, be it any compliance that we talked about. It can be GDPR, it can be CCPA. Now you create such rules, and using those rules, you'll be able to scan your storage in order to find out whether there are any PIIs really present in them. Right? I'm just waiting for the product to load. Well, the product is now up. So you just go to risk analysis, and then you go to configuration. You see that we have policies, rules, and alert profile here. You can basically go to policies. We already have a policy for GDPR created. Let's say you want to create a new policy for CCPA now that it's going to come into effect in less than a month. So you go to add policy, and let's say you do CCPA and Control A, Control C, description, CCPA. Now what do you want to track here? What is personal information? Well, we already gave you the definition of personal information. You can add a rule based on the definition that was given to us. So you just go to add rule, and for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to add, let's say, credit card information. So anything begins with credit, I wanted to add. Let's say I have close to 6 conditions here. So credit card, yes. Social security number, Sid, does that fall under the PII category, social security number? Yes. So I'm going to track that too, SSN. Well, you're not talking about the SSN of Spain, we're talking about the SSN of the US. Yep. So I add that. Now similarly, I can go on adding any PII parameter here, save this policy, and use this to scan my storage in order to first understand whether there are any such PIIs matching the condition present inside my storage.
And you can also do custom rules. So even you can define your own regular expression, and you can say that we give, with Data Security Plus, we give a whole bunch of built-in rules for a lot of different PII, but certain custom data that we have not yet built in, you can create your own regular expression for that, right? Very intuitively.
Awesome. Well, now the next thing after data discovery, the next thing what we're going to do is we are going to talk about access control. Now, when it comes to access control, there are 2 things that I'd like to share, because after discovering that you have personal information stored somewhere in your file servers, let's say, for example, you then have to ensure that that piece of information is accessible only by the appropriate audience, right? That's step number 1. Now, step number 2 is, how do you actually revoke inappropriate access, or how do you perform a health check periodically and ensure that such PII doesn't fall in the wrong hands? I'm going to show that to you. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show to you how to actually find out whether PII is accessible by inappropriate audience, for which I'd like to take you to my lab setup here. And inside my lab setup, I'm just going to, this is a demo setup. So I have a shared folder, okay? And this shared folder is inside one of my file servers here. So if I quickly open up my file server, the share that you see here is insurance and corp data. Now, I know for sure that these 2 folders have sensitive information, in the sense they have PIIs. And I do not want this information to be accessible by anyone else other than the important people in my organization, or let's say the appropriate audience. How do I ensure? But the problem with such shares, it's, you know this, that we're not just talking about one folder here. A folder can have multiple folders inside, and talking about NTFS permission, it's a bit tricky.
Yeah.
You know why it's tricky? Because when we talk about a parent folder and multiple child folders, the child folders can either inherit permission from the parent, or the child can have its own set of permission, which makes things even more complicated depending on the number of subfolders you have. So you need to know the permission in its entirety. It's not just 1 folders or 2 folders. We're talking about, you know, tens and hundreds of folders, and we need to get that information immediately, not just one after the other. So how do you get to understand the permission of a confidential folder structure in one shot, okay, without having to do this every time? Well, let's wait for the product to load. The first piece that I opened up was Data Security Plus. The second piece that I'm showing to you is AD Manager Plus. Do not worry, you might think that we are juggling between windows. That's just for the sake of it, but everything that you see here is also available as a bundle if at all you're interested in the bundle. So you go to permission for folders. I'm just talking about one folder here. However, you can repeat it for any number of folders. I select the folder that has PII, and I'm trying to find out who has access to all that information, which is inside one of my file servers. The folder that we're talking about here is carp data. So I'm trying to locate carp data. There you go. I hit OK. And who knows? Carp data could have 5 subfolders or child folders, or can have 50 child folders. So to be on the safer side, I do all subfolders. Now I'm trying to understand who has access to this piece of information, which is confidential, right? Now I get to know that, all right, these many users have access to my carp data, my confidential information. And I also need to know what level of access these users have on the selected folder, right? Now for which, all I need to do is just expand the report and then take a look at the permissions right here. So you have the shared folder and you also have the permission, and what level does it apply only to that folder or subfolders. So you now know the permission of the entire tree structure in its entirety. We are talking about PII here. And then comes the step of cleaning up, for which you'll have to just jump to the next tab, the management tab, and perform a cleanup of the folder if you feel that the permission is messed up, right? So this is one way of doing it. And the other way of doing it is, Sid, if I'd like to give a user access to a piece of information, what do you think most people would do? Do you think they would add them to a group and give them the permission, or
No,
assign
most
permissions
people don't.
individually?
I think most people just assign individually.
Individually. All right. So in most of the cases that I've been to, what happens here is, as a security best practice, most of the administrators, they don't go by assigning permissions individually. Instead, what they do is they just create a group that has all the permissions that is required. And every time when a user needs access to something, they add the user to the right group. That's it, right?
Right. And the group has
nested members.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the problem. All right. So what I'm talking about here is the second thing with regards to access control is, I want you to run a query against all your elevated groups that are in turn tied to resources, and see whether these elevated groups are touching some of the basic entities in your infrastructure. Let me give you an example. I've selected domain admins, which is the top level group in my Active Directory. So any user that I add to this group basically gets control over my complete AD, right? So now I select the group. I'm going to retrieve the users, groups, computers, and contacts belonging to domain admins, direct and indirect. And if I go to the groups tab here, you can clearly see that my domain admins group is a member of the intern basic access group and also the VPN access group. Now, Sid, tell me, any user tomorrow morning that I add to the VPN access group is in turn what?
domain admin.
A domain admin. That's not the direct group membership. That's the indirect group membership. Or as you said earlier, it's through nesting.
Yep.
Right.
And we don't want that. We don't want VPN access, a member of VPN access to have domain privilege.
Clearly that's the case. Now that takes me to the next point, which is, auditing. Now, how are we going to secure our groups? And how do I know whenever a user is added or whenever a user is removed from the group, that access is given to the user? How do I control it? Well, I have this group, okay? And before that, I'd like to show you something here just to make sure that I'm not cheating. So this is, again, another piece, an auditing piece that we offer. This audits events in real time and all that. Now, if you take a look at the recent alert section, I don't have any alerts stating that I have added or removed a user from a group, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show this to you live. Let's say I have this application admin group. Any user that I add to this group gains access to a sensitive application that deals with PII, right? And I have created a rule using an application from ManageEngine, and the rule goes something like this. Any user that I add to this group or remove from the group, I get notified in real time about the action. I'm going to show this to you real time. I'm going to add a user named Brandon here, So Bradon, Brandon Curry is the name of the user. Check names, there's Brandon Curry. I hit OK. Brandon Curry is now added. I hit apply and OK, which means from now on, Brandon Curry will be able to access PII which are tied to this application, right? And I'm sorry, this group, right? Which in turn has access to the application. If I go to AD Audit now, you would notice under the recent alert section, I have a real-time alert saying Vivin has added Brandon Curry to the application admins group. This is exactly what we are talking about in terms of access control. First, knowing who has access, and then second is auditing any such inappropriate change to access.
Right. That's basically this access control and change auditing is to make sure that first the accesses have been properly assigned and you can validate that, and then as and when they change, you're also tracking that to flag such unauthorized changes like the one that you just performed.
Absolutely, that's exactly the point of establishing an access control procedure and a change auditing procedure in the organization.
Right, and that brings me to number 4, which is more directly involved with the data itself, where you've got technologies like file integrity monitoring for your files, and the same idea, column integrity monitoring for your databases. Right, so here you're looking at tracking the changes at the data level. Right, so FIM tools are very popular. They have been around for many years, and they help you track every change made to your critical files and folders to ensure integrity. Right, so every time someone is creating, deleting, modifying, simply accessing or renaming your files and folders, even failed attempts to do these things are all being logged, and everything is being audited, so that if you find that, hey, why did this person change someone's PII, it could be maybe why did this person go change their address or something like that. The FIM tool can report on all of these events and also alert you for unauthorized activities. Right, so it's doing the 4 vital W's for your data: who, which, when, and what, for the changes happening to the data that you have in your systems.
Awesome.
Right, and that brings me to the last one, which is a SIM, a security information and event management solution, which really can do what we've discussed, what you showed for Active Directory, and what I said for files and folders with the FIM tool. But a SIM really extends this to the entire network. Right, so it can audit your AD, your files and folders, but also even some of these other systems in your network, like your firewalls, web servers, and any other system or application, and it can help you detect and mitigate threats before it results in a data breach. Right, and this is as you can see, this is a good, reasonable measure to have, because you can prove to auditors or to lawyers that, hey, I've had a SIM, I've been monitoring all of these events, which is also one of the reasons maybe why the data breach didn't become that big, and you were able to mitigate it before it was too late. And this will really help you when it comes to proving that you had reasonable measures in place.
All right, and although we showed our attendees multiple solutions, we kept jumping around this window, that window product. We'd like to just let all of you know that we have a bundled solution, or a suite, as you call it, that helps you achieve all this that we have discussed so far.
Right. In fact, I can just log in to just show you the UI. This is just like we saw AD Audit Plus. We've got a tool called Event Log Analyzer. And Event Log Analyzer and AD Audit Plus are bundled together into a solution called Log360. And this is a full-fledged SIM solution.
Okay.
Right? So you get all of the different, you get reports, alerts, correlations, and you're able to monitor what's going on in the network. And you get to see threats at an early stage and hopefully mitigate them before it results in a data breach.
Oh, wait. Will people be able to actually see now how Log 360 looks like? Because now, let's say Log 360 is everything. Do we have an online demo or something of that sort for?
Oh, absolutely. So if any of the attendees, if you're interested, if you go to Log 360's website, just search Log 360, go to the website. We have an online demo that you can access.
I see some questions there. So
yep, we can all of you out there listening can access this. Go to Log 360's website, go to the demo section. You will see this form under which you've got an online demo which has a lot of simulated data to give you a good look and feel of the tool.
So just to summarize the events that we have seen so far, so this basically helps you in order to understand whether there's something wrong. I mean, this helps you classify data.
Yep.
This also helps you with change auditing.
Yep.
And this also not just change auditing for your Windows, but also for any type of logs that you'd like to process. Yep. And understand whether there are any sort of PII present in it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Right. So this is how the UI would look like. You would see on the left pane, you've got AD Audit plus Event Log Analyzer, which I'd say are the two main components of Log 360. But you have the ability to add more components into Log 360 for monitoring specific systems. And this works out to be a pretty robust solution for data security and compliance.
What about cloud? I mean, PII is still stored in cloud. So
right.
Can Log 360 cover that?
Absolutely. Too? So the Data Security Plus module can, at this point, do data discovery and auditing for OneDrive. And we are looking at, going forward, extending this capability to, well, there is no perfect system, honestly, out there which can do everything at this point.
You said it. You said
right?
it. Yeah.
But we are trying to get closer to that, where you can have a single solution which can find out all the data across all the system, both on-premises and cloud, then apply seamless monitoring and correlate everything and get that level of analytics in. That is what we are headed toward.
Right.
But I honestly think anyone out there who says there is a perfect, like an AI system that can just magically do everything would just be kidding themselves.
All right.
Right. But hopefully we're getting closer to that going forward. So from ManageEngine, before we wrap up today's presentation, we showed you a lot of solutions. I'm happy to tell you that we've got our year-end offer running at this point, which means that all of the solutions that we looked at, we are giving a limited time offer for this. I'm going to send you a link on the live chat. So this link will allow you to, if you fill up this form, you will get access to our year-end discounts. And this is something that you can get immediately, right? So I'm just going to type this out on the live chat. So all of you would get a chat that is that's popped up right now. If you access this link, you can avail this year-end offer for all of the solutions that we discussed today, right? It could be Log 360 as a full integrated solution or just any one of its individual components as well.
All right.
And just one more thing, again, before we finish, we have a small poll that we are running. Just 2 questions. And we are going to just launch this for a moment. This is just to help us understand what you're doing at this point with evaluating our solutions. Just to know if you're an existing customer or if you're evaluating. So just quickly answer this one.
All right. So we'll just wait for.
Yep, just closing this one, and we have one more question on would you like anyone of us from ManageEngine, someone like Vivin or myself, to reach out to you and schedule a
tailor-made demo.
Yep, tailor-made demo for your requirements.
You can be evaluating the product, or you already own the product and you're trying to explore a lot more.
Yep.
Just let us know. Okay?
Yep. This is just so that we know who to contact and who not to disturb, right? So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to close this poll as well. Apart from that, if you have any questions, we've been trying to answer the questions on the live chat over the course of the webinar, and I don't see any other pending questions at this point. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to us via email. This is Vivian's email ID and this is mine. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope you found this Tech Talk useful. We've been doing this. This is the fourth or fifth Tech Talk that we've done this year. And I think it's proves to it gets more engagement than some of our traditional webinars that we do.
And one thing that I would request is, if you have a condition in mind that you want us to cover, pertaining to the CCPA, please write to us. Or if you need a specific feature, or you're looking for something, you want a tool to help you with CCPA, please write to us. Even if we do not have answers for all your questions, we'll do our best to get back to you with whatever we can.
Right. Do take a moment to fill up the feedback form at the end of the webinar. Apart from that, thank you so much for joining us. I hope all of you learned at least one thing new today. And have a great day ahead. I hope to see you at another event soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.